Okay, I'll call the February 13th special meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order for budget review. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ann Chicello, who is not with us tonight, she is ex officio this month to the Board of Education, and they're doing their budget review tonight, which is going to be quite involved, so we thought it would be important for her to attend that. Also, item 216, police. The police chief couldn't make it tonight for a personal reason, so we're going to reschedule that. I was going to add that to the agenda for a week from tonight, or a week from Wednesday, I'm sorry, the 22nd. Because that, there's several things, but most of those should go zoning, planning, building, and the assessor and registrar shouldn't take too long. So I think that's a good night actually anyway, because IT will be here, so I'll be all set with that. But everything else for tonight, as far as other things that were related to emergency management and dispatch and animal control, Lieutenant Jezierski is here to help with that, as is our Assistant Emergency Management Director, Julie Wilson. So, seeing none, the first department on the agenda is the Fire Marshal. Fire Marshal Bundy, if you would come up. As is our Deputy Fire Marshal. Oh. Yeah. If you could put the budgets on the screen, that would be really helpful. And this is budget number 224. Trying to improve the technology so that it'll be on the screens.
But we can see the budget work.
Yeah. I would do the first vote first, because I think people at home, could, if they're watching, could see that a lot easier and so forth like that. Okay. Okay, Bill, it's all set.
Well, good evening. And for those of you who don't know me and we haven't met, my name is Bill Bundy. Like Kevin said, I'm the Fire Marshal. This year's proposed budget pretty much reflects similar line items from the last several years, with the addition of a new line item to create a position of a full-time deputy fire marshal. Historically, I'll back up. Currently, our department is staffed by a full-time marshal and one deputy, one part-time deputy. There are two others who are on the books, but for the last, or since I've been here since May of last year, we haven't had any activity with them. When I took over in May of last year, there was also no administrative assistant. Historically, going back to what I researched in 2017, the department was staffed with a full-time marshal, a full-time deputy, and a full-time administrative assistant. And over the course of the years, although the budget has diminished in that respect, some of the responsibilities within the division were reallocated to other departments, which included the reduction of staffing. Unfortunately, some of our statutory requirements are still there in terms of inspections, pre-plan reviews, and investigations. Our department is required by statute, and there's over between 700 and 800 properties within the town that require some sort of an inspection on either an annual, biannual, or every 3 years, in addition to all the plan reviews. In looking at and I'm giving you this background to kind of justify why I'm asking for these positions. When I start looking at what we have in terms for inspections that are required, in this January alone, there's approximately 50 inspections that were required, that the majority of which were not inspected going back to 2019. And these are mandated by statute. So the need for staffing is to be able to maintain our requirement to inspect these properties. Basically, it's a one-man show with otherwise. So I'm asking for the full-time marshal to be a 37.5-hour work week, and that comes in at about $75,000. Now, the budget prior to that was $63,000 for the part-time marshals. This kind of segues into the next line item, which is clerical. This past line item, we basically split that in order to hire a part-time admin so that we can have somebody who's going to be scheduling and taking care of all the administrative function within the division. And again, as I said, we go back to 2017. We had a full-time marshal, we had a full-time deputy, and we had a full-time admin. So that particular line item is to increase the operating budget of the part-timers from 63 to 75, which is for the full-time marshal, and then create the next line item, which would be a standalone part-time administrative assistant, which would be at, currently we're staffing her with 24 hours a week. We'd like to up it to 28 hours a week, which will give me 5 days coverage within the office. Everything after that is pretty much the standard budget of what was last year, with some increases. Training operational, we upped it from 5 to 10,000 because we're anticipating the full-time deputy. We are mandated, in order to maintain our certifications, to have our certifications every 3 years. We have to have continuing education credits. This is to show that increase. Uniforms, miscellaneous supplies, nominal increases from last year.
And the uniform would also be to supply, because you'll need
Correct.
to outfit the deputy.
Correct.
If that was adopted.
Now, the offset to this, for this increase, and I think if I'm doing the math, it's about $50,000 from last year's budget to this year's budget. I've also have proposed a draft ordinance, which I believe will be coming up to the board in the near future,
Wednesday night.
for a fee structure. The same statutes that require us to do these inspections also affords us the ability to charge for these. And in that, as I indicated, we have about, on any given year, a couple hundred inspections with plan reviews. Estimated revenue could be in the ballpark of about $75,000, so this would offset any of the increases that we're looking at here. And not understanding that this is not the place to explain that, but we are probably the only town in the area does not charge for this service. So, and again, anticipating that would be the offset, all of the, the revenue would offset any of the increases.
Any questions for the fire marshal?
Yes, I'll lead off. Now, the projected revenue, did you base that on previous year's businesses?
That is based on, as I indicated, we have, with the fee structure, everything is determined. The fee structure that I proposed is based on language that is recommended by the state fire marshal. This is the same exact fee structure that has been adopted by surrounding towns, and it's all based on square footage. So if you look at whatever property, and again, it's based on the classification of occupancy. So if it's a multifamily, their fee would be set at whatever that is based on the structure, as opposed to, say, a Costco that's got that much more of a footprint. When you look at the annual, what comes in on an annual basis versus a biannual, that's a conservative number. And again, we can't project the amount of plans that we would receive, but similar to what the building department does when they receive a plan, there's a set fee there's a fee established for the plan review. There's also would be proposing a separate fee structure for the fire plan review, because more often than not, anytime we receive a building for, let's say, for the Midway Plaza for the fire, there was a building permit that was applied for any renovations resulting from the fire, but because it involves building code and possible fire protection, we also became a part of that process. So we're taking up man hours for that. There's a continual, it's not a one and done where you look at a plan and you say it meets all the fire safety code. There's all the follow-up that goes to that. So to answer your question, that's based on the type of properties that we have on an annual basis, being conservative for any sort of plans that we may come in for plan review. Now, it could be more in some years, it could be a little less in some certain years, but that's based on the rotation of what's coming in on an annual versus a biannual versus a 3-year. And we have like a small handful of 4 years, but I think that would be insignificant for this conversation.
So this, if this full increase were to be approved, this would cover any re-inspections that had to be done for previous inspections?
That's correct.
And then, is there any extra money figured in there for upcoming developments? Because we have quite a few potentials on the books.
And just to pass on, we're going to be discussing the rate structure on Wednesday night at our regular meeting in fall. So just
Quick answer to that is yes, it would. That would get factored into that permit, the building permit process, or the permit application. That would be when someone, let's say you've got this development that's coming in, they were going to be required to get a building permit or a permit for the project, and they would, if this were to pass, there would be a separate line item there for the fire protection component of that, based on, again, on square footage, and it's based on a percentage of what the building department charges.
other questions?
No, it's, if nobody else is going.
Oh, right.
The second line item there says part-time fire marshal, but I understand it's supposed to be full-time fire marshal. Am I maybe not?
It's currently part-time?
It's currently part-time, but that's,
So that's what had me confused, to why the rates were going up from part-time to part-time. But I understand that now, and I understand that Wednesday we'll talk about revenue, so.
and that'll be, if we adopt it, and the intent is not to adopt Wednesday, but have it presented, give us time to think about it at the next meeting.
Yeah,
talk
so
about adoption.
my comments about the revenue is that we'll talk about next week.
Okay.
Or the afternoon.
Wednesday.
Yeah. So that was my only questions.
Okay. Any other comments?
I just, yeah,
Oh,
I had
Go ahead.
Dan, then
oh,
Ann.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had a question on line 230 clerical. So is that a new line item? It looks like in the 22-23, there was nothing there. So is this?
That's correct. That would be a new line. Currently, there is a part-time admin position that we are funding, and it is coming out of line 213, which we're basically taking money from the part-time fire marshal to pay for that. And that would create, to maintain it, at the very minimum, maintain what we currently have, which is a 24-hour position. But I'd like to bump that up to a 28-hour position so I can get coverage throughout the 5 days of the week.
Gotcha. So what you're doing, you're breaking it out of what was the 213 PT fire marshal, you're showing it on a separate line.
Correct.
And then increasing PT fire marshal it'll be
To a full-time position,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just real quick, the previous fire marshal did not have an admin. He chose to use one of his deputies as the admin person.
Mhm.
That person left when he left, and there was a feeling that we needed someone with the expertise, and Bill did not have the time to do that as well as that, and the part-time fire marshals didn't have the time to dedicate to that as well. And
Yeah, Mr. Bundy, on uniforms, in the narrative, you mentioned 3 employees, so who's,
Well,
yourself and let's assume that
The part-time, currently we have Eric Quinn, who's a part-time fire marshal, but there are also 2 others that are still on the books. And, if I put that in there because they're there, so we would need, if by some chance that this didn't go and we're still gonna staff it, then in the event that we need to get them, a pair of boots or whatnot. But currently, it's myself and a full-time marshal, if we were to do that.
other questions?
Yes, on 2201, the telephone and the deputy cell phone, the expense covers the annual service for the office phone in Frontier. And then is the cellular phone in addition to that? Or is that comparative rate?
I believe that's a comparative rate. We both do have cell phones, and that's in addition to the office phones. I mean, I thought that was taken out initially because it wasn't coming out of the budget, but
Not 100% sure if the cell phone's being paid out of there or if that is just the landline for the fire marshal, direct line.
right.
We'll find out.
Okay.
We'll get an answer to that.
I'm all set.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Niantic Fire Department. Chief McDonald.
One of the things that you notice on this budget is that a lot of things haven't changed. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm getting the budget up there, just one sec. There's only one budget voted on.
Love technology.
All set?
Your show.
Here we go. Okay, as I said before, most of the budget hasn't changed. The first selectman made a couple of adjustments. One of the things you notice that went up is training and fire prevention on line 243. Went from 5,000 to 6,000. The reason for that is firefighter 1 courses went from 800 or 900 to 1250. Firefighter 2 courses are up to 950. So in order to get a new fireman, we have to get them through the firefighter 1 course at a minimum. The rest of the budget seems to stay intact. And that's about it. I mean, we didn't ask for a whole heck of a lot this year. We asked for some on the capital side. I don't know if you want to go through that now,
Well, I
or,
think you do have an additional firefighter in there too, correct?
yes, we do.
The 413, 164.
Yep.
That was it. Initially, they had requested 2. I reduced it to 1. So that's why you see the increase there. And pretty much everything else stayed pretty much the same. Longevity is one thing, obviously, we have no control over that by contract. So. And we adjusted the overtime up a little bit because of what we were seeing for the actual expense. But we reduced the part-time numbers a little bit because we're seeing a little decrease in that area this year. Any questions for John?
Yeah, so my question typically is, if we added a full-time person, why do I have an increase in overtime as well?
one of the things that happens is contractually, the firefighters work a 9-hour day. So that last hour of the shift is overtime. So they get automatically built in to their salary 5 hours of overtime every week. Okay, so that's one of the increases. The other increase is filling in.
But that's not new, right? I mean, you've been having to fill in vacations and.
We've had to fill them in all the time, that's
all the
right.
time. So if you add a new fire department, the new firefighter, isn't he available to fill in some of them spare shifts on straight time?
Depends where we put them,
Actually, John, not at straight time, you know, overtime for
It'll be overtime because he's still working his 45 hours.
them.
Yeah.
They can work their holidays, they can work all that other stuff, that's why there's such an increase.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I look at adding a full-time head, and a full-time head, so you I would think, there'd be less overtime.
Well, the other thing too is they have their annual salary increases. So what was it, 2.75 I think they got this year, and that's going to up your overtime rate.
And one other thing that he's leaving out, Bill, is it's getting harder and harder to fill with part-time. So if a part-timer can't work it, it goes back to offering it to a full-timer. Because
Right.
I know this past weekend, part-time shifts had to be filled by the full-time firefighters, which instead of at $25+ an hour is at a time and a half rate for the firemen. So, you know, this is something that we're meeting in groups to come up with, trying to work a solution to the problems we're experiencing right now with.
And I noticed that part-time went down, which is unfortunate, but I understand it is hard. We've talked about in past years about how it's hard to get part-timers and
It is.
to get volunteers. I understand all that. It just to me, it seems like if you had 40 hours, 45 hours, a new person, that would decrease overtime. Okay.
It's really not adding any. It's not as if we're adding people to the current working shift. So right now, what you'll have with that extra firefighter is you'll find out probably instead of one person out at Station 2 by Rocky Neck, there'll be 2, which is what's recommended. So you're still having, so if somebody's sick that day or somebody books
You're
off,
not gonna go back to 1, you're still gonna maintain 2.
We'll try.
We're going to try because right now there's some OSHA there's some regulations that we have to start paying attention to.
Okay.
So Bill, this budget, I could send you this work paper. I don't know if it's attached there, and for the department as well. But how we calculated the overtime was regular overtime at 5 hours per person, and then the call-in rate was also at 5 hours per person. So we budgeted for 30 hours of call-in overtime, and that's how we got to that 150, the 154,900. It's from this little spreadsheet here of the regular overtime hours, where John was talking about the 5 hours that they get every week. So that's part of their pay. And then the call-in, we figured they get called in. We're not quite sure the rate they get called in, but let's average 30 hours. So that's how we got those two columns of overtime amounts.
Okay. Hopefully this time next year you'll be telling us that they didn't need all that time and they got no extra money.
Well, the call-ins, you never know. I
No,
mean, it's,
understood.
anytime we go to a working fire, we generate an all-call for the full-timers. So.
And understand that if you didn't include in your budget, then next year when you went over, we would say, how come you didn't include it in your budget?
Right.
I mean, I understand that. I'm just kind of poking at it to try to understand the logic.
It's like going to Foxwoods and rolling the dice, you know.
It's a little more.
You know, what are we gonna do? How many times are you gonna call them in?
Then rolling the dice, but. anyway.
Okay, I got it.
Any other question for the chief? Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, Chief, just a couple of questions.
Uh-oh.
So, I didn't really see in the narrative a full explanation of the need for the additional firefighters. So could you elaborate on what is the rationale?
Well, one of the things is, first of all, we have a severe decrease in volunteers. Okay, during the daytime, we'll probably get one or two, if we're lucky. We get a working fire during the daytime, we automatically call an engine from Jordan because they're gonna send 4 guys over right away. So the decrease in full-timers, the decrease in part-timers, we're trying to put them all on a full-time schedule to go work right through the whole week, you know, Sunday through Saturday. And so in order to do that, we're going to have to put some more people on there.
Are you seeing increases in calls generally? I mean, month to month?
Yes. Last year, well, since July, the fiscal start of the year, we've done, the Niantic Fire Department alone has done 1,513 calls as of Saturday. Okay, it's crazy. I mean, years ago when I first joined, I saw weeks where nobody turned a wheel. The ambulance didn't even go out. And now that's going 5-6 times a day. And we're getting calls that are coming in threes. So we'll be out, Flanders will be out, and then the third call comes in, which we bring Waterford in. And Waterford's getting busier too. So it's to the point where we need to do something. And we need to put the extra people on to handle all these calls coming in.
The request has been made in previous years, and you know, I haven't,
Right.
with previous chiefs, I hadn't really heard the fuller explanation.
But that's it. I mean, the call, it's crazy. It's the only way to put it. It's crazy. You know, we got a chalkboard in the station that we used to use, erase it once a month when the month changed. Now where we list all our calls. Now we erase it every other day to put the calls in.
Just to put it in perspective too, we're meeting with a group that involves the Ambulance Association, the full-time professionals, the chiefs, fire marshal, to look at a better way of doing things, and every way possible looks adding people, because you know, the problem is you know, usually occasionally see a second tone. We're still not doing too badly in that area, but you know, if we could use some of the money in the part-time line item to possibly hire a couple other firefighters, then you'll see some of that reduction. But if you want to, you know, the reality is we're going to have to hire more firefighters as time goes on, because the level of volunteerism, and both chiefs would agree, is getting harder and harder. The part-timers is getting harder and harder to fill too. So, and you know, as you know, we've talked, I think, you know, public safety and ensuring the safety of our residents is one of our prime responsibilities, and that's what we have to make sure we're doing right now. You know, right now the Ambulance Association pays for 2 firefighters. We're looking to see if we could ask them to increase that, so we could get a couple other firefighters that they would help support. And then we're working through that right now, because we do need more resources out there that are here all the time. You know, it's becoming much busier. I mean, I get you know, just while we're sitting here, I've gotten not for now, because you would have heard their pages off, but you know, several calls. And there's times when you'll see 3 or 4 calls come in, and you'll also see, you know, mutual assist having to come in. It's just getting extremely busy. And at your end, the chief could easily articulate, York, every time there's probably a call, at least on a probably 5 or 6 times a week, and I'm probably underestimating to York. A HEPA, Crescent Point, you know, there's a lot of needs and calls for medical services.
You know, if you look at the demographics of the town, you know, we keep putting in these apartment buildings. You know, we got 80 units going in off Brybrook Road. You know, you come down, you got Rocky Neck Village, you got Freedom Way, and you keep going down. Village Crossing off Park Place. The number of units you put in, we're going to get an increased number of fire and medical calls. May not be right away, but it's going to happen. And people don't care whether we have 5 guys on duty or 2 guys on duty. They want to see a fire truck in front of their house so we can help them. And so far, we've been pretty lucky doing that.
There was a point a couple of years ago where there was a bit of a push by the fire departments to recruit more volunteers, but I don't think that it was really successful. What's your opinion on that? Any hope on the horizon, or is that a kind of a done, in the past chapter?
We got a couple new members this past week come in the station, but generally, in order to get a fireman, it's going to take you about 6 or 8 months till they get through the firefighter 1 course. Okay, and then if they want to be an EMT on top of that, that's another 6 to 8 months. And that course is a very tough course with only a 69% pass rate. So these people have to put a lot of time and effort versus years ago when I first joined. They give you a set of turnout gear and we train them. And away they go. But nowadays, they got to have all this formal training under their belt before we can let them go inside a building. So it's a big commitment.
And it's not unique to East Lyme.
No,
My brother's a fire chief in town, and he says the same thing, you can't find volunteers anymore. Because it takes the better part of a year to get them
Right.
qualified, and they don't want to sit around, they want to go to the fire.
Roseanne, go ahead.
Yes. Under line 220, vehicle maintenance, I noticed that in 2024, we had budgeted 34,900. That's your request, request for 2024, wait, I'm going back to 23. Okay, so on that line, I see that the amendment calls for requested for 30,000. And then you're projecting another increase for 2024, and then another for 28. Okay, I see what's happening. I misread it. But I am concerned that the vehicle maintenance, I think we're quite grateful that we still have a truck on the road that's 29 years old.
So are we.
So how often, is that vehicle kind of held in reserve, or is that something that's used very frequently?
It's used frequently. It's first line truck out. First one out. It's we have a replacement pumper. It's due here in November.
The one we approved, what will be 2 years ago, is due this fall.
And so but we'll keep this particular engine.
No, that'll go.
That's going?
Yes.
Okay, well then let's hope the tires don't go flat before then.
Well, we'll put tires on if we have to. I mean, we'll make it work. But the reason it went for 34.9 down to 28.5, the original one, is we had a discussion and we put in for tires for the ladder truck, and tires are about $800 a piece, believe it or not.
Yeah, and we also, what we did,
So
with the 3 of us, we did a tracking of where they've been. The 50,000 back in 2022, that's when they had that major repair that was, it cost $24,000, which, obviously that doesn't happen.
When the truck broke in half.
Yeah, well, it was an engine thing. But here again, the 28 has been above where they've been tracking. That's just which is why we did that for this year.
Okay, and then my other question is on the training, the fire prevention. Now, this is training that every fire official has to have.
Yes, the training there is, if they want to be firefighter one, we'll send them up to Willimantic Fire School. But we've had cost increases in all the fire training across the board, so that's why we upped that figure.
Now, I assume that we pay for them to go to that. Do we pay for them to go individually, or is this group training?
No, we pay individually.
But when they get there, are they training with a group?
With a group, yes.
So if we could offer our own training program here, would other towns pay for their fire officials to come here for the training?
Yes, they may.
And what is the cost per person generally of that?
It's about the same, I think.
But we wouldn't, it's not as if we would be doing the training, we still have to bring in.
We'd have to bring an instructor in. The problem with it is in order to do that, you have to get on the calendar that's released from the Fire Academy in Windsor Locks. So if we can get on the calendar, then we can get a course hosted here in town.
And then other towns would pay?
Then other towns would pay to come in to take the course. But that would be through the Fire Academy. It wouldn't be Niantic Fire Department.
They pay the state, not us.
Yeah,
We get 2 free classes.
yeah, that's what I mean. They'd be paying the Fire Academy.
Yeah, but
So,
we don't get the money the state of Connecticut does.
Of course.
yeah, so it's,
Sorry I asked.
Yeah, go ahead.
if we could get it, it'd be nice, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay,
One last question, Chief. In our capital budget, I noticed there's an upfitting of engine 3. Could you just describe what that upfitting is, and is it,
That's the $20,000 figure?
the 20,000?
Okay, that's easy. When the engine was conceived, Chief Barone come in and he asked for, I forget the amount of money he asked for. In order to bring the engine in on that dollar figure, the engine committee took off a lot of equipment. One piece of equipment they took off was a generator. Okay? The other problem the committee had is to get this engine ordered because there was a 15% increase coming up within a few weeks. 15% doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you're talking $800,000, that's a pretty good chunk of coin. So we brought so Chief Barone was able to bring the engine in at cost. The committee did a heck of a job on it. So now we need, without the engine, without the generator, the tools we're putting on it are going to be battery operated tools, which we don't have. So that's part of it, part of that 20,000. And there's some other equipment that has to go onto that engine. So we put it into the budget. Hopefully we'll see the truck in November. And we'll have it all up and running.
okay, I just got a notice from dispatch, please talk into your microphones. They're a long way off, so the only one they're hearing is Chief McDonald. And we've heard enough from him tonight, so
Oh, those poor guys.
just make sure you pull the microphones up. Jess, text me right now again, can you hear me speaking right now? I got a text from dispatch.
I'd also like to thank you, John, for stepping up and taking over the role of fire chief for Niantic. You got some tough shoes to fill with former Chief Barone.
Yep, Jim did a great job.
So I love coming to these meetings because I get to see all my former students
That's it.
when it's not an emergency.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Chris.
You still have questions?
Good evening, Chris Taylor, Chief of Letter Fire Department. Majority of my budget increase this year is going to be staffing. I think with a 2.75% with overtime, with the normal hours, that makes up the majority of my budget increase. Still, my OSHA budget is approximately the same. Vehicle maintenance is the same. One of the problems I'm having with the newer vehicles is computers. The problem is I would love to have a 29-year-old truck because to me there's no computers and to me they work better. But with all the newer equipment, you put a computer on it, and like my ladder truck over the last 2 years, we spent a good portion of our maintenance budget on just computers. They're out of date, and they just seem to go bad with the road grime and everything like that. So that's why our vehicle maintenance is kind of taking a good hit. The majority of the stuff, our radio maintenance, we have a lot of problems with antennas and stuff in the north end of town with the low-hanging wires and trees. Building maintenance, we try to maintain the building the best we can through the ambulance committee and our own personal membership. I'd say over the last 2 years, we've probably invested about $15,000 to $20,000 of our own money into the building. Small equipment, it's always been $2,000. We try to maintain all our fans, saws, and everything with that. Training, like Chief McDonald said, all our training is going up. This year, we currently have 3 classes that Flanders Fire Department's putting on through the state of Connecticut. So we get 2 free seats per class. We're doing a firefighter 1. I apologize. We're doing an aerial operator, a fire officer 1, and a fire instructor. So those will be held at Flanders Fire Department this year. We're offering it to all our memberships between Nyack and Flanders, and John and I will sit down and figure out what the difference is and kind of split that up amongst us so we can get everybody to go through if we can to get more guys trained. Telephones is the same. Our fuel cost each year, First Selectman Siri writes a letter to the ambulance committee, and the members through the ambulance association give back on the fuel. We pay for that out of our pockets, out of the ambulance. Was that letter? I apologize. Was the letter written and sent off to the ambulance committee for this year?
I just answered your question, I think, by sitting here looking at you. No.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Siri's going to write us a letter and get us that as soon as you can.
Yep.
Wink, wink. Uniforms are, our problem is anything with the fire, police, emergency services doubles in price, no matter what it is. If you go buy a ladder for your house, it could be $100. I buy the same ladder, it's $1,000. Once you put fire, EMS, police on it, we're paying through the nose, even clothes. I could go buy a sweatshirt for somebody or a pair of boots, and you're paying $200 for a pair of boots, but you need special boots, you need special clothes, and unfortunately, that's the world we live in. IT is 0. And really, that's about it in our budget. We've tried to maintain, over the last 8 years, we've had very little increase on our capital items. We're grateful that the ambulance committee stepped up and helps pay for a lot of the stuff that the town used to pay for. So, any questions?
Any questions? Okay, yeah, nice. And here again, the full-timer, will benefit both departments, but it's in the Nyack budget, not the Flanders budget.
And that's something that we've all sat down and agreed upon.
Yeah,
It's just there for now.
Exactly. So, any other? Okay. Ann, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Roseanne, go ahead.
Have you got a figure, close estimate of how many emergency calls you've made this past year?
I went to stop by and look at it. We had a call come in, so I missed it. But we're about 85% of what Nyack does. Nyack has a few more ambulance calls than we do. You're a little more populated. The busiest section in town is truly from Brybrook Rehab to Crescent Point. Statistically, it's always been that way for ambulance calls. I mean, I think the town, what did we do, 34 ambulance calls last year? 3,400? Something like that. Yeah, about 3,400 ambulance calls last year alone in the fiscal year. And then maybe another 1,000 in miscellaneous.
Just for Flanders?
For Nyack and Flanders. So we just purchased a 4th ambulance to run in town. So we're going to be putting on a 4th ambulance now. We're so busy. We had a problem where B200, the Flanders ambulance, got in an accident. B100 had a problem with its engine. And then we had 1 ambulance in town. So we're borrowing ambulances from other towns to make sure we had enough for tour around.
Yeah, both Waterford and Montville helped us out with loaning us ambulances because through no fault of ours, the accident where one of our ambulances was hit in Waterford on the way to the hospital, and the other one was having some maintenance done, and when the garage was sending it from one place to another for further work, they forgot to put oil in.
Yeah. Well, they put oil in it. They just put 2 gaskets in it and it leaked out.
Whatever they did, all the oil leaked out. So they had to incur the cost, but we lost the vehicle for quite a while.
Our problem is we couldn't get parts for it, so it took us almost 6 months to get parts for it. Nyack Ambulance just ordered a brand new ambulance, and it's a 1.5 years out. Before we were getting it in 5 months. Now we're a 1.5 years out for new ambulance.
Okay. You all set, Roseanne?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think because Nyack goes before Flanders every year, Nyack gets all the questions, and Flanders is like, yeah, we're good.
I like it. It's good for me.
Next, next year.
Yeah.
Make a note, Kev, make note of that for next year.
They were before the police this year, so I'm happy. It's before
Well,
10
the police
o'clock.
aren't here tonight.
I
so
know.
that's why- But they were at the end anyway.
Well, I
They
mean,
were-
I stopped it
yeah,
and asked for that change.
That's right, you did. And then that's why the chief wouldn't come now.
That's right.
I did have one question,
Sure.
Chief, yeah. About vehicle maintenance. How are you feeling about the amount here of the reduction from 21,500 to 19?
We're gonna do our best to keep it in there, you know, we try to do some stuff for the town if we can. We're gonna try to work within our parameters, it's tough, but
And here you
the
go.
cost of everything has gone up, but like I said, we're trying to, unfortunately, I've had some computer issues, so I'm hoping that money will be enough. Just some unforeseen issues. And I have newer apparatus, so I'm not in that 10-year mark for tires yet, so that's really what's gonna push us to, that's our big next expense.
And your approach is to have the town mechanics do as much as they can,
For the s-
except if it is
Yeah,
something
the smaller
that,
stuff, yeah, if, you know,
that-
if I have a broken wiper blade, if I have something I don't need to have a fire apparatus come down and fix, you know, we're trying to do some smaller stuff if we can through the town.
Yeah, because that was a problem a few years ago. We just don't have the ability to fix that major
Yeah.
job a
Right.
few years ago. And because there's only a few garages in the state that can
you
do
have to be
that.
certified to
Yeah, you have to
do
be certified on the
those
pumps, you have to be,
repairs.
yeah, so there's a
Correct.
lot to go through the
Okay.
certifications for, so the minor stuff we can, you know, do ourselves, but really, once it comes to anything with the engines and the pumps, you really gotta be careful. So,
Okay.
Okay,
Any
thank
questions?
you.
All right, thank you, Chief.
I would just,
Oh, I thought.
no, well, I don't have a question, but I would love it sometime if we could have a presentation and really educate us on what happens when there's a call. And, you know, we've got 3,400 ambulance calls.
yeah,
What vehicles go out, how many people?
Sure.
What's the staffing, and
so,
I think that'd be helpful to us at some point,
yeah, whatever, let me know,
presentation
we
like
can
that.
do
So we
times,
have a
tell you who's
better
working,
understanding.
break it
Yeah,
down that way.
that's the group we're working on now. We're gonna
Yeah.
come, because here again, we wanna propose some adjustments, but we don't wanna do it fast, we wanna do it right.
Right.
And we're gonna look at calls, it's gonna look at ways to enhance what we have and minimize the financial impact, because right now, you look at the money in the part-time accounts, those could fund a couple firefighters, full-time firefighters. If the ambulance association helps us again too, it does enhance us to do a lot of things without a lot less. And there's unanimous agreement that we need a full-time, paid, in-control fire chief. So that's one of the things here too, and we're trying to identify all the financing for that too, when we come forward.
No, I agree.
Okay.
But, yeah, no, it would just be, I mean, this town has changed in 20 years,
Yeah.
it's a whole different scenario than what we had.
It's all good.
Okay.
As I recall, when I was on Board of Finance, we had Chief Ricks was there at the time, and we went as a board,
Yeah.
or not all together, but some, 2 or 3 at a time, to really
Tour.
spend some time in the building at Flanders,
Sure.
and to look at the equipment, to understand which vehicles go out when, for what type of calls, and
Right.
it was really illuminating,
And
so maybe it's something
anytime
we
you'd like
can
to
do.
come back up, we could do that again, because I think sometimes just by walking through and understand it, I mean, one thing to drive by and see it there,
Right.
but to understand, you know, some people don't understand why you have 2 fire engines, or why you have a ladder truck, or why there's a
Right.
rescue truck. You know, one nice thing, we're lucky we have the ambulance that helps out purchase a lot of things with the ambulances, with our pickup trucks. I mean, this year alone, I just bought a new pickup truck for Station 2 and a UTV that we've been trying to get for Flanders for years. They just purchased it. So we bought a brand new pickup truck for Station 2. I have a UTV that we're getting a fire pump and it's called a med sled on in the back, so if anybody's stuck in the woods like there was tonight, we can go in and get them. But that's all compliments, you know. Fire gear alone, $5,000. When I joined the firehouse, it was $800. But to buy, if we have a new fireman that joins, a new volunteer, you send them to Fire One, it's $1,000. EMT's $1,200. And you buy them a set of fire gear, you're almost $8,000 invested in the person. And it takes almost a year to get gear now.
What is a UTV? I don't know.
It's a side by side, like a gator, like.
Oh, one of those.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Again,
We have a lot of the trails now.
Yeah.
That Gary Gaishel built through the north end of town.
yeah,
So we have no way of going through all them.
right.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, thank you.
All right. Mike, are you doing the ACO part? Thank you. doing 226 animal control.
Yes.
Yeah. It's up. Go ahead.
All right, good to go. All right, so the first thing that you're going to notice is the increase within the ACO 211 salary line. If you go down 2 lines below that, the part-time / assistant ACO 412 is down negative 100%. So that's with making that part-time ACO a full-time person. So that got absorbed up into the salary line. And just remember that with the animal control, that we split that 50-50 with Waterford. So the salary portion of that, so 50% of whatever the expenditure is for that fiscal year at the end does get billed out to the town of Waterford. The overtime line, we do have a little bit of an increase there, and that's going to be due to the way that their schedules are. Since they are both full-time, they're both covering the town for the complete 7 days a week. We do have to pay them for outside calls. As an example, last year, the report I have is based on a calendar year versus a fiscal year, so just in 2022 alone. After hours call-outs, they had a total of 99, so there were 59 in Waterford and 40 in East Lyme, so that equals out to about 1.9 calls per week that they're out. They get a minimum of 2 hours because they're normally coming from the house, responding to the call, going to the shelter if need be, but if not, then returning home. So there is a little bit of an increase there just to offset that. And again, that's billed out and separated between both towns at 50-50.
And with the overtime, if it's a Waterford call, they got it. If it's an East Lyme call, we got it. So.
Right. So each week when payroll comes in, they submit a sheet to us, and if they've had an outside call, we have that. It gets sent over to finance in a report, and then at that point, finance basically divvies it up and splits it and figures out which town, how much they have to pay us. The next increase you'll see down is 223 equipment. The actual expense in 2022, you'll see, was 2304. We had adopted 900. If you go back to the previous fiscal year from that, I think the actual expense for the 21 year was $850, and we had done a $50 increase. Part of that was when we got the new ACO vehicle, and that which was grant money that we had been sitting on for a while. Once we finally got it outfitted. One thing that it was lacking was sufficient air conditioning, like an air unit in there. So if we're, on a summer day, it's 90 degrees outside, they pick up an animal, they're stuck in the back there. There's a partition that blocks the passenger compartment from the rear compartment where the animals are held. So some of that money was used to offset that. So that's why there was that increase last year. So we're just really looking for an additional $100 in that line. And that is basically the last increase there.
Any questions for Lieutenant Masick?
I'll start off. This is only for domestic animals.
Correct. So they are, all the calls for it's domestic and then of course wild animals as well.
Okay, because I thought when we were having the big deal about the coyotes, which by the way are still a major problem,
right,
as you're aware, that local could not deal with that. It had to be the state officials.
So they go, for looking at how the trapping and how everything was going on with the way that the coyotes were being dealt with, yes, the state had to get involved with that. For the most part, though, anything else that you see, whether it's skunks, raccoons, seagulls, deer, if need be, if we have an officer that can't respond to, like today there was a car versus deer. An officer did respond to that, but we've had times where, again, we have 3 people on the road, they're tied up, so the ACO would come and either dispatch that animal on scene and remove it properly. So they do deal with the wild animals as well. So over the course of 2022, their calls for service, they had 1,222 calls, which equaled out to about 3.35 calls per day when you divide it out over 365 days.
So now, as we continue to have a coyote problem in town, particularly the downtown area, I had a local resident call me a few days ago and say that she didn't dare to go out of her house because there were 3 coyotes sitting on her front porch. So can we go through the local department and ask the state to come back again and try to do something about this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, if she's scared to come out of the house, because there are 3 of them who decide to park right on the front porch, I mean, definitely call, for sure. Call our animal control, have her call the police department, if anything, if they're not available or they don't give us some kind of direction, we can at least, go out there and scare them away. We have, the officers on the road do have some tools on them, that they can use, as well as the ACO, whether it happens to be pepper spray or just a loud noise is enough to scare them away, because they kind of react like, nervous dogs also.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on. Julie, you're up for emergency management.
Hello, everybody. We don't have a lot of major changes on our budget as well. A couple of standard increases. We're requesting 2% COLA for the communications officer and the radiological officer, who get a monthly stipend. The salary in the deputy emergency management director was per agreement and the contract for the position, and that became effective July 1st of 2022. Our building maintenance, we were requesting, now that we're in the new facility and a more appropriate need for that money, seeing that building maintenance the actual department has figured us into their main budget, is to use it for an emergency resource fund. For example, based on current climate, if something's happening and we have a large event around the corner and there's a concern that, whether it's a copycat concern or something like that, we have those funds are available for us to use for resources for additional protection measures for, say, a Celebrate Lyme event or the parade, one of the parades or something like that. We did actually use it last year during Celebrate Lyme. We used additional resources to come in preceding the event that happened in Chicago at a public parade. So it's just an extra security measure for the public to do. We're pulling all our resources together to ensure as much safety as possible at the events. Let's see, our telephone account. That was a really, obviously a big reduction by combining the 2 departments into the one building. We now have just 2. We now have 2 different vendors that we use. The NUSO SIP trunk service, which provides the service for the majority of the building, and then we have our copper lines in the 911 center, which are paid for still through the landline service at Frontier. So that we realized about almost a $3,000 reduction in our expenses annually by doing that and combining the services. Training, just a small bump up for regular annual monthly membership fees. Transportation allowance, we've requested the same amount. I myself have done a lot of traveling across the state this year for trainings for emergency management, and so that's definitely something that we would like to keep in place. Our miscellaneous supplies, that should be showing 17,000. Did that go down?
17.
Yes, okay, that did, because we took $1,200 where we are paying for the full boat for the phone services for police and emergency management, fire marshal in the building. All those phone lines are covered under this budget. The police have taken over the cable services. So that's why the $1,200 was deducted from this budget and moved into the police budget. It just keeps things a lot cleaner. Instead of having, two different POs for the same bill, pay this much from this one and this much from this one. It was just basically a wash. They pay that, we pay this. So it was simplifying things. And that looks to be it. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Julie?
Perhaps you mentioned it and I missed it, but line 320, the miscellaneous supplies, that's a big increase from where we were at 2022.
Correct. And the biggest the increase last year was due to the cost of the Everbridge emergency notification program that we had signed up for. So that was last year's increase. And then this year, we're adding an additional $5,200 for the annual cost of the VOC emergency management software program. That's something that was paid for through ARPA funds. We had received $12,497 from the ARPA funds. We purchased that program, which included training for 2 admins, one of which is me. I've gone through that training. We've since selected a second person, one of our midnight dispatchers, Forrest Andrews, is going through the course as well. And so his hours, over and above his position, need to be paid for to take those trainings. But in actuality, that's basically the main reason for the increase this year. Is it's not $12,000 a year, thankfully. It's $5,200, and it's something that's we've been working diligently at, and it will provide, I think, big dividends in the areas of efficiency in the town. Being able to we're in the process of creating forms that will go onto our website, which will simplify things for the public to be able to sign up for. If you're within the 10-mile EPZ of Millstone, we have the cards that come in the mail, and typically they get filled out and they get mailed in to the state, and then they eventually trickle down to us, and we have to manually input all that information. And the hardest part with that particular one is that people they're supposed to renew it every year. They're supposed to update any information, or if somebody passes away, they're supposed to notify us so we can take them off the list. Well, our list got to be almost 500 people. And I said, there's some people that have been on here since 2011, and we haven't seen any, updates and whatnot, and trying to get a hold of people. And the time factor of trying to call every single person on this list to find out, have they moved out of town? Have they been moved to a convalescent facility? It's very, very time consuming. So this program, the form will go online and they fill it out. It automatically populates into a spreadsheet for us. And by them providing their email address, a year post their submission, will automatically send a reminder for them to update their information, which will be very helpful in keeping the list current and eliminating a lot of tedious time and making it available for us to do more important, things that are sitting on the side waiting.
Any other questions for Julie?
Yeah. Once we got the new building, one of the ideas with the new building was supposed to be efficiencies by having everybody together and all that. So I've been going through the budgets and kind of trying to see where some of the efficiencies would be in. So it's good to see that your building maintenance went down to 0, but then this emergency resource is to pay for essential emergency services.
Mm-hmm.
As if we don't typically pay for essential emergency service. I mean, it just seems like a very generic category.
Well, it's for a resource that we don't have, per se. Like, for instance, the need to provide security over a community event. After this happened in Chicago, we enlisted the services of outside police that had drones. And we utilized those to be able to survey the entire area of the event, the entire the entire time of the event to ensure the safety of the public. The places, to be able to see the places where the officers on the ground can't control, rooftops, for an example. It's an extra level of security in a time when we all know an event like that happens, and then you have a copycat situation, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, what a great idea. Let's do that. Not so great. So we try to think outside the box, and if it means, spending $1,300 for the safety and security of our community, then it's money well spent. So that's pretty much just a buffer. So in the event something is happening currently around the time when we have a large event scheduled, it's an extra level of security for not only our community, but for our officers that are patrolling the events and all that kind of good stuff.
So the expectation is that budget line item would stay there every year? It
Yes.
wouldn't stay in the police department's budget for manning drones? That would be like,
Well, Bill, this is for a special event. This would not really be a police item. This is like emergency management. This
Right.
falls directly under what they do as far as events like celebrating Lyme Day and the light parade and things like that.
Hold on.
Mike,
Bill, this is just to cover basic like security measures that we normally would not put out to the general public prior to a large event such as East Lyme Day or the Light Parade or something like that. We bring in equipment that we don't have as a town, but that some other outside agencies have, and there does come a cost with that. When we do bring in other officers from other departments, those guys come in free of cost to us under the mutual aid compact, just like we would provide people for, say, Sailfest, go up to Putnam for their light parade or their car, things like that.
no, I get all that.
Right.
To me, it just seemed like a unique line item for something new like this when we've been doing this type of security.
Right, but
for years
that
and
with
years.
that, as a selectman just stated, under the police, certain things fall under our preview for things such as that. But under the emergency management umbrella, there's that added layer of security that even coming through like DHS and things like that is offered through them, and it just makes sense to have it fall under the emergency management budget versus the police budget itself.
Okay.
yeah, because we have the regional DMIS and so forth like that is where a lot of these resources come. So that's why it makes more sense under there. And obviously, don't get into the details because that's the whole purpose of the added security.
And trust me, as soon as FEMA gets on board with, funding some of these resources, we'll be writing grants to get our own. But until then, when we need the extra help or whatever, that's what it's there for, as a buffer.
Any other questions? Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana, we saved the best for last. For dispatch, 215.
Okay. Okay, so you'll notice two increases with the dispatcher's budget. First one is line item 212, dispatcher's salary. That's contractual raises for 8 full-time dispatchers. And the second one is 217 for training payroll. We bumped it up from 6,000 to 7,000. Again, that's for mandatory training that all of our dispatchers have to do. We have 8 full-time dispatchers. We have 6 part-time dispatchers on the books. They're all required to do biannual training as well as, state mandate requirements for training. So that's to pay for them to go to training. Everything else in the budget is the same.
Any questions? Any questions?
Yeah, I always have questions. It wouldn't be me if I didn't. You added from last year, how many, you added 1.5 last?
We went from 2. We went from 6 to 8, so we added 2.
But your overtime stayed flat.
Yeah, the problem with overtime is the part-timers, they have 2 shifts per week, every week. They historically have been unreliable. There's no mechanism to make them work. So it's hard to get part-timers to take those shifts, so it needs to be filled with full-timers. We have to have a body in that seat.
And when we hired the 2 full-timers, it wasn't to add, it was basically to start managing.
Because it was unsafe to have
the midnight.
Right, we
person
went
there
from
by themselves.
not
No,
needing
no,
to.
I
right.
fully supported the adding the new, because like I said, I worked third shift by myself, and it's not a healthy thing to do. It just, again, it's a running thing here that it just seems to me that when we add full-time people, overtime you would think would naturally go down because I'm adding people. On the off shifts, you're increasing to a minimum, so anytime anybody's out, you need somebody to replace that shift. I understand it. Okay, I'm good. Well, I don't know about that, but I don't have any more questions.
Any other questions? See, you were so thorough, you're all set, so. Okay, and that, okay, that is it for our reviews tonight. And the police, we're going to add till the 22nd, which will be a week from Wednesday, so we'll amend that agenda to include that too. So, and since this is a special meeting, we cannot add anything to it or discuss anything further, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned.